Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you are in the world. Welcome to RCI Mondays. Time for another single car championship, and this time with the Ginetta Cup. And tonight we are bringing you round 7, the finale from a mild and clear Donington Park. I'm your lead commentator for tonight, and back alongside me is Kevin Boss, leaving Ryan Mawson behind the cameras, and of course next door to us, as always, the live stewards. Welcome everyone.
Yeah, welcome back. It's good to be back, having had to miss last week due to other stuff I had to do. But it's good to be back, and it's very nice to be here at Donington, which is my, personal local UK track. So really looking forward to see what these guys and these cars can do here.
Yeah, great to have you back, Kevin. Indeed, sadly, sometimes other things do take priority. However, made it back for the finale, which is great. And if I'm not mistaken, you were racing here on Saturday just gone.
Yes, in the Saturday night owl, struggling through the hairpins that we just saw Wolf Matuszka go through in the GTR. Also raced this in the Random Track Championship a week and a half ago. So, yeah, I've seen quite a bit of Donington recently.
Yeah, definitely a great circuit. I myself did a solo 3-hour event here, I believe last year before in the V12 Aston. So I know all about those struggles through the hairpin. Trying to wrestle a giant car through there is not fun. However, what is fun is, of course, the Ginettas, and we have seen some superb racing all season long. The championship tonight is still all to play for going into qualifying. So every position you get on the grid is going to be crucial. And looking at the top 3 in practice, Kevin, it is super, super close.
Yeah, it's your usual suspects in Wolf Matuszka, Betty, and Benjamin Harman, which are also our top 3. No, sorry, not our top 3, but very close at the top of our championship in Pro. So that's going to look like it's going to be a very interesting race if they keep this speed up through qualifying and throughout the race. But we've also seen a few silvers get up there in the top 5, top 10 in free practice. So if they can keep that up, it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It's great to see, of course, like you say, silver drivers holding their own against the big pro boys. You've got the big names, you know, Wolf Matuszka, Benjamin Heilman, Mikael Sundström, Christopher Straper, Andy Boardman. But so many big names all in the top 5 of the championship. Everybody with good amounts of wins, second places, poles, fastest laps, etc. Everything that can give you points towards your championship standings. And look at the snake of cars behind Christopher Straper. Everybody is super keen to get themselves out on track jostling for track position. I believe this is actually Benjamin Heilmann, my bad, not Christopher Schweper, as we thought, leaving the pits. But Benjamin always first out of the pits, always very ready on the starter, the ignition, getting the Ginetta out on the field, and of course where you want to be, at the head of the field. Lovely amounts of clean air, just 24 cars tonight. Tom Shipston being a late joiner in the session, but a very clear track ahead for Benjamin Harmon as he navigates his way now down into the Melbourne hairpin of turn 10. Last time out, we did see a reverse battle from Suzuka. We saw Marius Torzidlo take a commanding victory side by side. Into turn 1 went Torzidlo and Machuska with a literal reverse of Suzuka, but it was the Polish driver that prevailed over the 1 hour race, with Machuska hanging on to P2, Christopher Schweper taking third. Still to play for, which we will be covering at the end of the qualifying session. But now jumping on board with Benjamin Harmon, tweaking the steering wheel into Redgate, using all of the pit exit. Got to be very careful on your mandatory stop that you don't come out into the side of another Ginetta. Drivers on track, of course, going to have to be cautious of traffic coming out down the Crater Curves, flat out all the way down now. Turn 4, old hairpin, big braking zone. You want to try and slingshot yourself through this corner, uphill towards under what would have been Starkey's Bridge, of course, up to McLean's. But bigger run you can get out of that corner, the better, because you're going to be dragging alongside your opponent, and a great place to pass up here. Turn 7, McLean's. Be very, very careful on the inside curve, a big dip down into the grass, and be very careful on track limits upon exit now. Turn 8, Coppice. Feels like it goes on forever. Big drift there from Benjamin Harmon, coming in right on the limit already, pushing these Pirellis to the absolute limit and beyond. Not really going to be enjoying it all too much. Of course, no tyre blankets in the GT4 car, so these tyres aren't even going to be up to temperature, up to pressure. The tyre bale has already taken a hit through the S's. Turn 9, keep it very clean, all over the grass, trying to maximise every inch of the road he can. And now down into the Melbourne hairpin, turn 10. Very awkward, as Kevin said earlier, in a GT3 car, going to be dreamy in the Ginettas, flicking the car through there. And now down to turn 11, Goddard's your final turn. You're going to see drivers taking a much deeper line when they begin a lap, all the way out to the right to slingshot themselves as fast as they can down the start straight. And drivers that are on a lap, of course, are going to be taking the shortest line possible. Benjamin Harmon across the line, 1:35.210 to set the benchmark, already beaten by Wolf Matuszka and already beaten by Christopher Schweper.
Yeah, it did look like Benjamin Harmon could have had a few couple extra tenths, especially coming out of the S's, getting a bit of the grass there, and a few couple other places where he slid around a bit, where he can gain some time. So we already know those guys are going to be very close already. But yeah, as these are GT4s, they have no tyre blankets, so they're very cold when they go out the pits. So this is only their first proper lap. So when the tyres are heating up, getting up to pressure, we can only see those times drop.
Yeah, certainly still a lot to gain as you look to the top right-hand side of your screen. This time track is optimum from the beginning in qualifying. Dominic Fekete, another driver who is battling for silver honours overall, and as wide as the Pro Championship is, the Silver Championship is equally just as wide, with still the top 3 all to play for tonight at Donington Park. So keep your eye on the board on the left. Anybody who hasn't watched our broadcast before here at RCI TV, anybody with a white background is what we refer to as a pro car, and anybody with a grey background to their number board is what we denote as a silver car. Of course, drivers can fight freely between the classes. There's no need to yield. You know, you can put a silver car in a bunch of pros as a curveball. It's going to get super frustrating if obviously the pro field starts streaking away, but the silver driver is just enough to hang on to the back of it and try and keep his opponent at bay. And of course, we've seen it time and time again between Christian Lindgren and Konrad Jetson, of course, using the pro cars as kind of separators between their championship fight. Andy Boardman down in P6, Dominic Fekete now P6, just outside that top 5 as drivers start streaking in with their second round of times. Torzidlo tops the board this time with a 1:34.5. Wolf Matuszka back to the pits to take a new set of boots. Christopher Schweper still has room to improve there, I would say, along with Benjamin Harmon. And now Christian Lindgren up into P5 as well. That's going to be great for his championship contention. And Konrad Jetson all the way down in P11. So Jetson still with a big chunk of time to find yet.
Yeah, that's a pretty big gap between him and Lindgren, the two main protagonists for the title in silver. But yeah, as we said before, they're probably still warming up their tyres. Maybe they still have to tweak a bit of the tyre pressures to get them in the optimum window. And yeah, they still got 9 minutes to go. So more than enough time to set in a couple of laps. It's not the longest track, Donington. Oh, and there we see again Snooty McFluid, previously known as Yan Yo, in that horrendous nightmare fuel car with the big eyes, the big mouth. Oh, it scares me every time.
It's the final round tonight, Kevin. It's the final time we're going to have to look at this car. But you weren't here last week, but Tim Ireland gave me a very interesting fact about Janyo, aka Snooty McFluid. He has 10 liveries uploaded to the Flying Hellfish Traders team on the RCI website. That's 10 liveries of cursed faces on the front of them. But now Marius Tordidlo navigates the last turn, a little bit of opposite lock. Delta looking good on the timing board so far. Bleeding time to the line, a 1:34.410, extends that gap over Wolf Matuszka even more, as we see now Albin Manson in the 127 Sim Brothers Racing. It's going to be interesting to see, will Albin Manson and the other Nordqvist brother be helping Christian Lindgren to try and get that championship win today? And he does slot himself just behind fellow Swede Mikael Sundström in the 899 for P8, and this man here, Victor Nordqvist, just behind, coming to the line now. P13 currently resides in the silver category, does bump himself up just behind Mikael Sundström, so we've got a nice line of Swedes there from P6, 7, 8 and 9, so going to be interesting. And speaking of Swedes, the greatest Swedish name I believe in sim racing, Oliver Hagstrom Vigersjö. Mikael Sundström once told us his surname was pronounced Wiggle Wiggle when we asked him in a private DM, and of course he was lying big time. Takes P11 in the 811, and Tom Shipston just behind in P12. And look at that, Kevin, top 13 drivers, just over a second between them all as it stands with 7 minutes to go.
Yeah, that's very close, and that means that there is still some time to gain for the guys that are, well, let's say from Maximilian Vettel down. They still have some time to gain. Christopher Strape also with almost half a second. I think Wolf might already be near where he can get. But yeah, you never know with these guys. All of a sudden, their last lap, they'll just put in a stonker of a lap. They'll shoot up by about half a second, get ahead of Marius. So you never know what's going to happen here. But yeah, with the track now being optimum, it's not too hot, so the grip should be perfect for all these drivers. So once they've got their tyres into the correct temperature and pressure range, yeah, this should be very, very close.
Yeah, some good conditions today at Donington Park for these Pirelli tyres. 21 degrees air and 25 degrees on the track, as we see Maximilian Vettel take a big chunk of the inside curb through the old hairpin, running up to the top of the hill now towards McLean's turn 7. Looking at his delta, looks pretty even so far through the first couple of sectors, although a nice time gain through there. Be very careful on the exit curb, don't want to run too wide, don't want to invalidate that lap. And now into Coppice, we see Ginetta kind of sliding in and then sliding out again. Big load of understeer coming in and a little bit of oversteer coming out as he now rounds Starkey straight down towards the S's turn 9. Looking at the delta, still a little improvement here. Got to keep it very clean over these curbs, can be very easy to hit track limits. And as I say that, Maximilian Vettel unfortunately invalidates his lap on the right hand side of the curb. So it's going to be interesting to see how many drivers can respect those curbs and respect the exit curbs at the top of the hill, as well as Christopher Straper now puts himself into P2 with a 1:34.642. His teammate just behind him in the shot there still resides down in P5, but this man here, Mikael Sundström, nearly on pace. The 899 Ginetta, not seen too much of him this season, been a bit patchy here and there, but still good haul of points for the round he has turned up to, and now comes towards the line, does take a P4 with a 1:34.840. Best lap yet. And now fellow Swede Albin Manson, we're going to see a little bit of a train of Swedes if prediction was correct, if they've not shuffled their order and come back to the pits for various reasons. Albin Manson now does improve slightly to a P8 with a 1:35.102. Still just under 5 minutes of qualifying. Still quite a few names on the table that I thought would be a bit higher. Andy Boardman down in P14 is one of them, Kevin.
Yeah, usually you see him somewhere around the top 5, fighting to get near the first or second row. Seeing him that low is a bit of a surprise. But yeah, could just be that he doesn't really click with Donington, or that on his laps he's made little mistakes or ran into traffic that he had to back out of his lap. We don't know exactly because we haven't really been on board with him. So yeah, anything could have happened there. but seeing his track record, we can expect him to jump up higher on into the pecking order.
Yeah, certainly would expect Andy Boardman, like you say, just towards the top end of the field. As we run aboard now, bonnet cam with Nicholas Nordquist. Very different angle. Don't see too many bonnet cams in the Ginetta series. Get a real kind of sense of speed sitting on the hood of one of these as he now breaks down into the Melbourne hairpin. Two very different lines you can take through here. You can either kind of nail the two inside apexes quite tight, or you can kind of run it a little bit deeper and just try and do the old switcheroo cutback and just get a good run towards the last turn. But Nicholas Nordquist in P17, very far off the pace, 1.445 seconds to gain, takes a run towards the line. Nicholas Nordquist does improve up to P11 with a 1:35.305. Still 3.5 minutes to go, so still plenty of time for him to improve. And now next Swede on the road, Victor Nordquist, P9 currently with a 1:35. But Andy Boardman, as we cut forward to him for Greased Weasel Racing, does jump up into P7. That's much more where we see him with a 1:34.9. Victor Nordquist now across the line, no improvement to be had there. 1:35.140, still the best lap, but not a position gain, I believe.
Doesn't look like it, no. But as we said before, we do see these silvers just creeping between the pros as we saw in free practice. So we're now looking at Richard Phillips in the 2:02 coming around the last corner. Currently, he's got about 3/10 improvement. No, sorry, he went through the S's going towards the Melbourne hairpin. Currently, yeah, around 3/10. So, yeah, he seems to have lost a little bit of time going through the S's, but still an improvement as it is at the moment as it goes towards Gollards. The final corner, hopes to get a good exit to launch himself further up the grids. Onto the power early, but not too early to slide away. Looks like a good exit. See where he ends up. He gains a position with a new time of 1:35.787.
Say Richard Phillips is one of those drivers for the RPMS Simsport boys that just kind of seems to do very well at one track, and then we kind of don't see him for a few tracks, and then out of nowhere again he's kind of right up with the pro guys battling again, and it seems a tad inconsistent, but definitely when he is switched on and in the groove, he can really put it to the pro guys. Deutschland Masters in the AMG 2020 version. Definitely stuck it to the pro guys in that championship. But Mikael Sundström now residing in P3 as we switch back to Marius Torzidlo, currently with 1:34.327. Matthew Kingston lead there ahead, taking that wide line that we did say about earlier in the broadcast to try and maximise his run down the pit straight. Still enough time in Torzidlo for another one. A 1:34.207 does gain again, pushing that gap ever bigger to Wolf Matuszka behind. But this man here, Christoph Verstreper, is just outside where we expect him to be, you know, consistently finishing in the top three. Currently resides third in the championship, I believe. 0.435 to gain to the guy ahead, which is Torzidlo. Still very small margin until he takes the position off Mikael Sundström, and 0.2 before he does claw back one from Wolf Matuszka, but runs himself too deep into the final corner. I'm hoping, Kevin, that was deliberately so he could set himself up for one more shot of the bit with 45 seconds to go.
I think so, with having then one last lap to do it, though looking at the time he was setting, it was half a second up. It was a very good lap until that point, so we'll have to wait and see whether it was a good decision from him to abort that lap and try and get everything out of the next one, hoping he doesn't run into trouble here. But thinking where he is and how much he was improving, I would have just continued that lap, because you know that's a good lap. You're not too sure whether you can actually do as good a lap on the next one, if everything goes perfect or not. So we'll have to wait and see if that was the correct decision.
Yeah, that's it. You never quite know if that was the correct decision until you kind of take the risk and attempt it. But looking at the circuit map on the right-hand side, you see the number 7 car, top right-hand side, just coming onto the straight now. You have nothing but clear air between now and the start-finish line. But Dominic Fekete down in P3 for silver, P15 overall, does improve slightly up to P14, but still has 3 pro cars before he can even chomp at Victor Nordquist to gain a position back. And Benjamin Harman now running very wide. Looks like ahead. Christoph Verstreper has done the same over the grass. Hopefully that hasn't hindered him too much. It has invalidated Christoph Verstreper's lap at least. So no improvement to be had from the Belgian driver. Jumps back to the pit lane, but Benjamin Heilman all the meanwhile matching his pace time for time across all three sectors. Can he improve in just one corner? Tries to get a smooth run out on the power, no oversteer. Checkered flag comes out, wiggle of the steering wheel, no improvement from Benjamin Heilman. Currently locks himself into P5. Not too many drivers left across the line. We have Richard Phillips to be the last driver across the line, and he does improve up to a P13 overall, so great improvement from the RPMS SimSport driver.
Yeah, and that does put Dominic Facchetti a bit further down the order in silver, making it more difficult for him to get that win in order to fully secure that victory in the silver class. But yeah, anything can happen in these races, especially going through the first couple of corners when they're all bunched up. A lot can happen. I've seen it in both races I've done over the last 2 weeks. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens there.
Yeah, certainly all to play for in turn one. Very lethal corner indeed. But now we will be bringing you, of course, the championship standings for the finale here. And look how close it is at the top. We have Wolf Matuszka leading the way on 134 points. Marius Torzidlo with 120.5. Just half a point behind. Christoph Verstreper is going to be the kind of curveball that gets thrown in amongst these guys at the top. Benjamin Heilman with 86.5. Jose Jimenez, who unfortunately is not here with us tonight, 77.5. Andy Boardman on 70. Maximilian Vede, a driver that looked very confident at the beginning, unfortunately only down with 66.5 points in P7. And then we have a lock-in of the Swedes, Mikael Sundström on 64, and then Oliver Hagstrom Vigashu on 44. Mark Elgaard rounds out your top 10 with 43.5. And moving on to page 2 now, Joe Dorber on 43, Snoody McFlood, aka Jan Yo, on 40, Albin Manson on 33, Bart Matcher 24, Tom Shipston 17.5, Matthias Tornberg 13, Nicholas Nordquist rounds out your top pro driver on 6. Everybody else has unfortunately signed out of the championship.
And now we're looking at the silver class with Konrad Jetsen leading the way with 133 points. Not too far behind Christian Lindgren, 121. And only 3.5 points behind is Dominic Facchetti with 118.5 points. So those three could all still win the championship this race. Going to number 4, Matthew Kingston Lee, 89. Victor Nordqvist, 80. Richard Phillips, 69. Ethan Scott, the same, 69 points in P7.
Nice.
Shirley, P8, 65.5. Matt Stevens, 57. And David Grinstrom rounding out the top 10 with 53.5 points. There we go to our own Ted Edwards with 52 points in the Pigeon car. Matthias Beyron, P12, 41.5. And rounding out the silver class in 13th, Mike Redford with 38 points. The rest have signed out of the championship.
So as we round to the grid, cars getting ready to fire their engines for one final time down on the grid. Air and track temperature 20 degrees Celsius air and 25 degrees track. So ideal conditions for these Pirellis. We shouldn't see too much stress, too much overheating. Probably won't see too many people taking tyres in the pit stop. Typically, I reckon we're going to see a lot of late pitters, of course, with a mandatory pit stop. Last one tonight, 1 litre of fuel to be added. Tyres are, of course, up to the personal preference of the drivers. But as I said, I don't think we're going to see far too many taking their tyres tonight. And from Tim Ireland, I have a few ifs and buts, let's just say. From his stat sheet, we have any of the top 3 in the standings could, of course, take the win tonight with 39 points on the table. Matuszka, to your right, needs to finish at least second to get the win if Torzidlo takes pole, which he has. So we're going to have to see Wolf hold that second position to be able to take the championship win away from Torzidlo. We had an if Torzidlo doesn't take the pole. Wolf only needed to manage third or higher. If Torzidlo crashes out, God forbid, he won't gain anything in the drop rounds. And if Verstraper crashes out, again, God forbid, he'll gain 16 points, obviously, from his drop round there. Down in silver, we have any of the top 3 can, of course, take the win. Again, 39 points available for both classes. If Lindgren takes a pole, which he has, Jetson needs to finish at least second to guarantee a win. And if we look where Jetson is on the board, Kevin, all the way down in P19 overall. So he has got some big gains to try and make. And we had, if Lindgren doesn't take the pole, he needs at least a third to secure a victory. But of course, Lindgren did take the pole overall in silver. Jetson would gain 3 points from a drop round if he scores 0. Lindgren would gain 21.5 from a drop round if he scores 0. And Dominic Fekete would gain nothing, of course, with 2 kind of sign outs, I believe, in his season so far. So a lot of ifs and buts up and down the grid. Lindgren takes the pole in silver, of course, with the Sim Brothers car you saw on just the right-hand side, number 33. I believe we've already walked past it. And Conrad Jetson all the way down in P19. So he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 silver cars to clear. And in that 5 silver cars is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pro cars. So he's got to pass 10 cars before he even gets a shot at Christian Lindgren. And if you were very eager-eyed there, Ted Edwards is back on the grid. Of course, no Movember livery this time out, but we will have another look at that car hopefully later on in the race to see what themed livery we have coming up on the Pigeon.
And as you might have seen, there was a bit of flare from the sun. The Pigeon now has a little Christmas hat on as it's the festive season. Just switching up a little bit as he does like to do. Keep it in theme with what's going on in the world and what time of year it is. So it's nice to see people like do things like that. Keeps it fresh, gives us something to talk about. But yeah, looking back at what Jetson needs to do in order to get the win in the championship, he, by qualifying that low, he's given himself one hell of a job.
Yeah, certainly a big standing order for Jetson to try and claw his way back up the grid to have a shot at Lindgren. So all Lindgren really has to do is pray that his fellow Swedes of Albert Manson, Victor Nordqvist and Nicholas Nordqvist essentially just act for kind of rear gunners, almost like you saw in the the early touring car days where factories would support 3-4 car teams. You'd always have 1 or 2 being gunners and kind of like the lower end of the car that would do everything to try and help the championship for the team and the driver that was, of course, dominating the field back in the day. So I think we're going to see a lot of Sim Brothers cars gaggled together. Hopefully no friendly fire will take them out tonight. God forbid. Of course, we do want a clean race. Nothing like we had at Zolder earlier on in the year where we saw record numbers of stewards' decisions being held out. We saw stewards working overtime, of course, all night just to resolve all the events that went on in the sprint race. So hopefully we can see a comeback of them later on in another calendar. And of course, while we're talking about stewards, let's have a shout out to them for one final time. Of course, AJ, Andreas, Connor, Daniel, Glenn, Jesse Lee, Martin and Will Stevenson are all in the box tonight, frantically casting an eye over the race in their many, many different angles that they do have access to that we do not up here in the booth. And Torzidlo, very, very far ahead there on the gridding up process, trying to get all the heat he can into the tyres. Of course, Torzidlo with the inside line, Wolf Matushka with the outside line as they head towards the line for one final time. One final green flag will wave. And we are, of course, a long old hold there. There we go. Finally, green flag drops. Both cars running to the line. Torzidlo to the inside. Matushka to the outside. Favoured line on the inside there. Mikael Sundström firing up the inside of Christoph Verstraper there. Benjamin Hallman hanging back a little bit, thinking, not going to get involved in this one. And now we see the gaggle of the Sim Brothers cars. There we see them all fending off, I believe, possibly Maximilian Vede there, losing out a few positions to the Sim Brothers car, and it certainly is down into the old hairpin, inside line given up there. Great run up the hill by Vede, waiting for the timing screens to sort themselves out. I believe possibly Lindgren there, silver leader, wanting none of the fight, wants to try and keep it as clean as he can as he runs now up towards McLean's. Vade on the back of the pro field, jostling for position up ahead though. Christoph Verstappen, Jinx left, Jinx right, sends it up the inside into Koppis. Machushka to the outside, Verstappen on the inside, side by side now down Starkey Strat. I believe Verstappen might have backed out of that one, possibly a little bit too aggressive into Koppis. He went definitely fired up the inside. Torzidlo ran himself deep, Machushka ran himself deep, and Verstappen saw a chance and he seized it with both hands there, Kevin.
Yeah, it looked like he went a bit sideways going through McLean's before they went up to Koppis, and that might have lost him that little bit of an edge he had over the deep break of Torzidlo and Matushka. But yeah, then not being able to capitulate on that as soon as Nicholas Nordqvist behind the scary car of Snooty McFlude as they go towards Goddard to end the first lap, currently sitting in P14 as they round out the last corner. And that is the first lap, and I think overall that's been quite a clean lap as we already see two cars enter the pits. That's Victor Nordqvist and Konrad Jetsen taking an early pit stop. And this might actually, if you look at strategy, Konrad Jetsen, this could be a very good shout. Getting the free air, not having to fight through the entire field, and then maybe being able to get higher up the grid to fight Lindgren at the latter stages of the race.
Yeah, only problem I am seeing with this, look into the track map on the right-hand side. Number 19, that is 19 of Victor Nordqvist, has come out ahead of Konrad Jetsen. So what Victor Nordqvist can essentially do for his teammate Christian Lindgren is, like I say, act as a rear gunner. He can fight Jetsen. All he wants, as we see contact there, Joe Dorber into the side of Oliver Hagstrom. Digashu coming out of McLean's, a little bit of a sideways moment from Joe Dorber, and of course snapped his way into the Swede alongside and sent him to driver's right. Hopefully Oliver Hagstrom Digashu is all good. Hopefully he's going to get underway, see his car moving on the track map, which is good, but he's going to have, unfortunately, a fair bit of damage from there, so you might see another Ginetta into the pits. But courtesy of the commentator, Kevin, we were just saying that it was, such a clean start, so great to see all the drivers getting along for one final time, and then we see our first contact, unfortunately, of the race, and Ted Edwards there, looking up the inside of Matthew Kingston Lee, just in the front of the shot. Goes side by side down towards Goddard's turn 11. Kingston Lee to the inside, Ted Edwards to the outside. Can he make a new stick around the outside? I believe elbows out there from Kingston Lee. Ted Edwards goes a little bit wide, and this, of course, brings David Grundstrom's Valvoline car now into the mix, although I think Ted Edwards has just about managed to get a clean enough exit. Jinx to the left, Jinx to the right, looks to the inside. All the meanwhile, Matthias Thornberg in the mirror contact with David Grundstrom. A bit of Swede on Swede friendly fire there through turn one.
Yeah, we tend to see some Swede on Swede contact every now and then, because there's so many of them in this competition. Usually they keep it clean, but not this time, as Ted Edwards can now breathe a little bit with what happened behind him as they now all run towards McLean's, as we now see Snooty McFlude going through that corner towards Koppis. He's got a little bit of breathing room, but he can't make any mistakes, or Dominic Fichetti will be right in him to capitulate on any mistake that he makes. But yeah, there now seems to be a little bit of a gap between Snooty and Phillips.
So I think the timing ball is possibly bugged out a little bit. There we go. Snooty McFlude now ahead of Richard Phillips. Dominic Fichetti is going to want to have a shot at the back of Richard Phillips's car. That is, of course, a car in the silver class that will gain him championship points. So Fichetti all to play for tonight to try and claw back anything he can from Christian Lindgren and trying to claw back anything he can on Konrad Jetsen for the silver honours, although top three still very admirable in a one-make championship. It's not easy with the calibre of drivers we have here tonight, and we've had all season, to be fair. We've had some great battles up and down the grid. And look, Christian Lindgren still glued to the back of Maximilian Vade's virtual drivers by TX3 Ginetta, but of course two cars in two very different classes. So as long as Vade really isn't, holding up Lindgren, all he's got to do is hold. If you look to the left, he's got Tom Shipston and Snooty McFlude as kind of like a buffer between himself and Richard Phillips and Dominic Fichetti. So when you see Phillips get past McFlude, that's probably when you want to start trying to get past Vade. But of course, if he can keep his eyes down to the front, make no mistakes, although it looks like he's about to cut the curb an awful lot coming up the hill under Starkey's bridge. But Benjamin Heilmann finds himself now ahead of his teammate into P3. So will we see any team orders between these guys? Of course, Heilmann is just a little bit too far behind to do anything in the championship fight, although Verstappen is going to want to seize every single point he can, unless they're going to be working together with Heilmann providing the tow for Verstappen to try and get him up to the back of Wolf Matuszka, who's of course a good couple of seconds to the good now. Just see him ahead of the shot there. And Andy Boardman, who was saying in qualifying, Kevin, was nowhere to be found. He's up into P5 somehow.
Yeah, must have been a very good start for Andy Boardman, being able to squeeze himself through a little bit of mistakes that probably the likes of Maximilian Vettel did. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see whether these two will work together. And then talking about Benjamin Heilmann and Christopher Strepe, because they have been fighting tooth and nail in previous rounds. So we don't know whether they talked before about helping out each other, as we now see this gaggle of cars just tucked behind Snooty McFluid, all the way down to, what is that? It's down to the 24 of Mike Redford. So that's 7 cars in there, as we see Ted Edwards heading to the pits, and Mike Redford trying to fight Mike Bayron there, as we already see the first penalty come in. So we'll have a look at those later. But yeah, that was quite a gaggle of cars going through the last couple of hairpins.
Yeah, certainly something you might not want to get involved in if you are trying for a championship fight. Mike Redford, of course, fending off now Matthias Thornberg with a 5-second penalty that Kevin just mentioned. Of course, we will come to that later when stewards kind of finish with their first couple of laps. Of course, the first lap was relatively drama-free, and it all kind of kicked off on lap 2. Thornberg there looking to the inside. Redford unfazed by it, just takes his normal racing line, pulls out a great gap between the two now, so starting to space the field out a little bit, although Richard Phillips now onto the back of Snooty McFluid. Here we go down the Starkey Straight, into the S's. Snooty McFluid there just getting a little bit ahead of the game. Big cut across the S's there. That's probably going to be a track limits if ever I saw one. Runs wide on the grass, possibly even picking up another one. That could have been 2 track limits in one corner. Driver's going to have to be very careful here. 52 minutes of racing, and that chicane is very, very awkward. As I'm sure you know, Kevin, from your race on Saturday, it's so easy just to pick up a track limits every single lap, and then 4 laps in, you're already coming through the extra drive-through. Yeah,
well, I think Snooty might have been lucky there with hitting the grass on the exit, losing all that time, so the game might have been leading with him. But yeah, especially once that tyre barrier is gone, it's so easy to just cut a bit too much of the corner and get that track limit, either on the inside or the outside. But yeah, it's very easily done. I think in both races I did, I got 1 there in like the early laps of the race.
1 certainly isn't a bad number to have for track limits, and now we see Maximilian Vede in a Sim Brothers Jurassic Park sandwich. We see Albin Manson ahead in the 127, and a big lunge there from the virtual drivers by TX3. Shoehorns open the door, and now Christian Lindgren side by side heading up into Coppice turn 8. Hopefully Manson will be very respectful to his teammate, and he does. Gives him loads of racing room through there, and Tom Shipston now on the back of this fight, set to gain a few championship points from Albin Manson. Of course, live timing yet to update now as the drivers do cross down. We see Manson there shuffling down to P8, Tom Shipston P9. So now Lindgren has another 3 pro cars separating himself from Richard Phillips. And flicking back to the back of the grid, Konrad Jetson, of course, on the comeback drive, now finds himself stuck behind our festive pigeon of Ted Edwards. And of course, if you look ahead, Nicholas Nordquist and Victor Nordquist are now the next 2 cars in line. So he could find himself in a similar situation to Maximilian Vede, where all you can see is a Sim Brothers car ahead, a Sim Brothers car behind, and they can essentially box him in and delay some progress to allow Christian Lindgren to kind of escape up the road, essentially. But can Konrad Jetson find anything at all in the Carbon Sim Sport car? But flicking back, of course, to Christian Lindgren, this is your silver leader, just stuck behind Maximilian Vede. They have been battling to and fro. Matthias Thornberg now coming into the pits to take that pit stop along with the additional 5 seconds. So we're going to see him shuffle his way down the order. And Oliver Hagstrom-Viggersjö, great to see him. Hasn't given up, Kevin. He's still down in P18 on a comeback. Still yet to pit as well, so drivers, keep your eye on.
Yeah, it's always nice to see that drivers continue, even if something like that happens where they get hits, lose a lot of time, lose a lot of positions, maybe struggle with damage. But yeah, always nice to see them continue. But I can only see, looking at this fight between Lindgren and Maximilian Vetti, that at one point Lindgren is going to try and send it up the inside at one point. As we're now looking at Richard Phillips trying to do that same thing to Snooty McFlude as they go to start straight towards the S's. I think it's a little bit too far to try anything here, but if he has a good exit to the S's, he might have a good shout going into the Melbourne hairpin. I think both drivers have a good exit there. Richard Phillips slightly better, not enough, I'd say, to shoot anything going into the hairpin, as Snooty McFlude also seemed to cover it off, but then went wide at the second apex. We're now going towards Goddard's. But yeah, it just seems a little bit too far for Phil to try anything in these corners at the moment.
As you say that, Kevin, the door opens wide. Snooty McFlude to the right-hand side. Richard Phillips finds himself up the inside, but Snooty, of course, with the better drive off the corner, finds himself gapping Phillips down into turn one of Redgate. I thought we really had a move on there with the curse of the commentator. Of course, as soon as we say something isn't happening, all of a sudden it does happen. And Snooty McFlude, of course, using all of the road in a bid to escape. But this, all the meanwhile, brings Dominic Fekete lights ablaze in the yellow with the black stripe down the middle car. Of course, we've got the yellow car of Matthew Kingston Lee in tow as well. So a nice silver fight emerging down towards the mid-pack. But up the top again, we see it. We've seen it again, Kevin, time and time. You know, previous rounds we see Torzidlo streak away, and then at this kind of like quarter to midpoint, we see Wolf Matuszka kind of gain back what he's lost, and all of a sudden we find themselves in a little bit of a fight. Whether Torzidlo goes too hard on his tyres from the beginning, or whether Matuszka just kind of, you know, nurses the tyres in a little bit better, so he finds himself switching them on, albeit a little bit later than Torzidlo does. But then, of course, the Torzidlo pace fades off, is time to be told. But these guys separated now by 0.2 of a second coming in to the Melbourne hairpin. And a message I hadn't even noticed, to be fair. Mikael Sundström is unfortunately no longer in the race due to internet issues, which is something I don't hear a lot of Swedish people talk about, Kevin, with their internet infrastructure over there.
No, I was about to mention it. I just saw it pop into the chat we have here on YouTube. It's a shame because where is he? Like, I didn't see anything bad happen to him, and then all of a sudden, well, we get this message as we now look at Jetson still trying to get past Ted Edwards in the pitting car, going through the S's. Oh, and that's a big cut from Ted Edwards. If he doesn't slow down enough, he probably will get a track warning for that. He's still trying to defend against Jetson, who's flashing his lights, trying to put Ted off. As they now go side by side towards Goddard's, barely giving each other any room. Side by side still as they go towards Goddard's, but Ted Edwards seems to have closed him off. Oh, and Ted got hit by Jetson. Let's see if he waits for him. Does seem like it, so yeah, that's still at least good sportsmanship, waiting for Ted Edwards to get going again. But yeah, that does give David Grundstrom 2 positions there.
Yeah, Grundstrom gaining good out of that little fight. Of course, a little mistake there from Jetson. Ran into the back of Edwards, but does the sportsman-like ship, as you say, Kevin, and gives back the position. Great to see. Obviously, stewards are going to be looking at that piece of contact and thinking, maybe it was fair. He did lift off. He did lose a lot of time. But, of course, it's not going to help Jetson's run to the back of Christian Lindgren. Lindgren can fight Vede all he wants at this stage. I think he is a yard and a half clear of Jetson even getting near him. Of course, once Jetson clears Ted Edwards, he's then got to get through 3 Swedes of David Grundstrom, Nicholas Nordqvist and Victor Nordqvist, who are of course all under the same banner as Christian Lindgren. So if we do see anything, it might be a few touring car tactics of a little bit of a hold up to halt the progress, although unless something happens to Lindgren, I think this one is in the bag. If I was Christian, you just kind of want to get your head down, focus to the back of Maximilian Vede's car, and just don't make a mistake and don't get involved in something that you really do not need to get involved in. And Matthew Kingston Lee now has found his way past Dominic Fekete. Not great for Fekete's championship lead, of course, I'd say championship fight on that one. And Kingston Lee is, of course, going to profit from that, jumping up a position in the silver class into P3. Bottom step of the podium for Kingston Lee. Great performance so far. Now he's just got to get the laps in to try and catch the back of Kingston Lee. But once again, the battle rages on with the Ted Edwards Santa festive holiday pigeon, however you want to call it. And of course, Katrina Scott in the chat. Better late than never. Welcome, Katrina. Great to see another livery on the grid from yourself. Keep up the great work. And Ted Edwards with a big send on David Grundstrom. takes them both out of the race into Redgate Corner. Not sure if Ted Edwards there was very distracted or something, but just completely ran through David Grunstrom like he wasn't even there. And now Jetson says, thank you very much. I'll see you boys later.
Yeah, he might just been looking too much at the front of Grunstrom's car and just missed his brake marker, slamming into him due to that, which is usually what happens in takeouts like that. Yeah, it's a shame. You don't want to see that, but it does happen. As we're now looking at Dominic Fouquet still trying to get past Kingston Lee as they go through the Melbourne hairpin on towards Goddard's. But we've had a couple of penalties come through, so do interrupt me if something very interesting happens. As we just go to Wolf Matuszka and Mariusz Twardsidlo. We've got an incident on lap 1, turn 10, involving the 54 and the 123. 5 seconds for the 54. 54 forces its way past 123, position not returned. That was the early 5-second penalty that we saw. Lap 1, turn 4, incident involving 137 and the 48, racing incident, minor contact. And the same for lap 1, turn 9, involving the 48 and the 202, also racing incident, minor contact. And the last thing that we got coming through is lap 2, turn 7, following the 37 and the 811. Drive through for the 37, taking out 811. 37 was not in control of their car as they ran wide prior to contact.
I believe that was Joe Dorber, possibly, whose name I'm not seeing on the board, so might have just called it a day after that penalty come in. Maybe thought, you know what, I'm not gonna come back from this one, so let's hand in the towel while we can before we spend too much more time fighting everybody else. But speaking of fights, Wolf Matuszka looking to the back of Mariusz Twardsidlo, still locked bumper to bumper, 0.452 to the good last time by through the Melbourne hairpin. Of course, we did see that gap down at 0.2 of a second, but we know, Kevin, that Wolf Matuszka is one of those men that gains a lot in the pit stop sequence. So, of course, just under 41 minutes of a pit window to go. Typically, we see the leaders come in towards the end of the race. So, usually in the last 2 to 3 minutes of the pit window, they fuel themselves pretty much for the entirety of the race, come in, drop a litre in, and off they go. Again, Christian Lindgren still glued to the back again of Maximilian Vede. Still no move to be had here, as long as Vede doesn't kind of hold him up. Although, just popped up on the board, drive-through for Lindgren, for Nicholas Nordqvist on that one. Not had a steward's note through yet for the 137, but we will keep our eyes peeled for that one. And while we're here, Ted Edwards, back we go again, this time Matthias Thornberg and David Grunstrom, so a different Swede behind him this time. David Grunstrom, one of them. Matthias Thornberg is the other one, of course, in the Pink Panther liveried car, not to be confused, of course, with the Pink Performance car of Wolf Matuszka. And just a little breakdown of everything here at RCI this week. Still with the run-up to the Christmas period, we do have a jam-packed calendar. Kevin, feel free to interrupt if anything does happen while I'm going through this. Of course, Tuesday, still with an empty slot after the APAC Cup rounded out. Wednesday sees ourselves with the Random Track Championship take to round 3. Round 1 took place here at Donington Park. Round 2 was Barcelona, and overall Dario Balzaghi finds himself ahead of Chris Downing. A fight we saw before at RCI in the Deutschland Masters between the two, and Leonardo Grigas taking third. Silver standings, Joe Dorber at the top, George McDonald in second, and our very own RCI staff member Grim Lilith currently stands third at the moment. Thursday this week continues, of course, the multi-class championship with GT4 and TCX. John Aracer still taking a commanding lead in GT4 Pro from Matthew Malcolm and our very own, again, Will Stevenson, who, of course, is stewarding tonight. Three-way Spanish fight in GT4 AM between Danny Santo, Javier Gonzalez, and Omar Rolano, all in Alpines, interestingly enough, so definitely the choice of car in that series on Thursdays. Andy Boardman leads TCX from TCX Pro, should I say, from Snooner McFlude and Benjamin Holman, and Harold Klopperman leading TCX AM from Hubert Halder and Andreas Vic Osland, driver we've seen again, Deutschland Masters, dominating performance in the M4 GT3. Great to see him signed up for another event as well. And Friday this week continues our mini winter series, round 2 at Circuit of the Americas, which will of course take up take us right up to the Christmas holidays this month. Kiladki takes the lead for Fidele and De Campo after round 1 there. And Saturday this week sees round 4 of the Endurance World Challenge here at RCI, with Suzuka taking the stage. A nice easy one this weekend, Kevin. Just a mere 6 hours for everybody to tackle. So not too much compared to the 12 that we've seen a lot in the calendar this year.
Yeah, it does feel like the 6 hours is a lot less when you compare it to the 12 hours, or if you look at the World Tour, the 24 hours, which are absolutely massive races. Though, I will say, I was a little bit disappointed that you didn't go into the AM class for the Random Track Championship with me in P3rd. A little bit of self-promotion.
Self-promotion, Kevin Boss, in P3 there.
But yeah, it's definitely a bit easier for all the drivers not having to do as long hours. But it also depends on team composition, of course. Like if it's just 2 drivers, 3 drivers, or for the longer races, if they put in a 4th, then of course it helps everyone out. But yeah, if they keep the same composition throughout the whole championship, let's say if it's 3 drivers, yeah, then the 6 hours is a lot easier than the 12.
Yeah, definitely. So I remember my first 24-hour race was absolute hell. I'd never done one before. And it's so weird. Obviously, like IRL drivers have, the motorhomes and the coaches and teams and all kind of hospitality. And then my sleepy-eyed person wakes up at 5 o'clock in the morning and then has to drive in a virtual sim race. Like, how they do it in real life is beyond me. Because I struggled to do even an hour in the car at 5, let alone being like at Le Mans at like 4:30 in the morning.
It goes up to the outside of Tom Shipson towards the S's. Goes a little wide going through the second right-hander there off the chicane. Lost a bit of time there. The S's is not really the best overtaking spot for me, but at least he tried.
Yeah, S is very tricky to pass. Very surprised they even attempted that, as David Grundstrom now takes the rallycross line out of the old hairpin and under Starkey's Bridge, or what would have been Starkey's Bridge, and it nearly throws the car sideways. And another drive-through popping up for Ethan Scott in the 34. Again, still waiting for the steward's note to come over to us in the commentary booth. But yeah, how real drivers wake up at 4:30, jump in a prototype car, hammer around Le Mans at nearly 200 miles an hour in a lap, and stay awake. It's crazy. I can't even do it virtually, let alone in real life. So kudos to any racing drivers, virtual or real life, who have of course taken on any 24-hour challenges, and hopefully RCI will be hosting a few more next year. Sunil McFleod, though, not giving up on the fight of Tom Shipston. Gave him maybe a little bit too much room into the S's. Great run out of the old hairpin up the hill, through turns 5 and 6, and now sets himself to the inside for McLean's turn 7. He can get it stopped before the apex. A little bit of a slide coming out, although holds onto it well, and the Flying Hellfish Tater's car takes another place. And Tom Shipston probably looking in his mirror then thinking, that's an ugly sight. I don't want to be seeing the front end of that car in my mirror much longer. Onwards you go, sir.
Yeah, definitely. As we now see Nicholas Nordqvist trying to go on the inside of Grundstrom, going into Red Gate. Seems to have done it, though, of course, having the wider line will give you a better run, or more speed at least, but the inside line is what you want to have through these first couple of corners, as he does complete that move as they go towards the old hairpin, and looks like Nicholas Nordqvist is able to keep the position for now, but they still have that run up towards McLean's, past Starkey's Bridge, where Grundstrom seems to have the inside line, but he looks like he's backed out of that move, opting for a safer option. But yeah, what I wanted to say, I did the 24-hour Spa this year, and the weird thing for me was it's because they changed the start time from what is usual. They keep it correct with the European time, but then this time they switch it to the American time. So we now have a look if Tushka can have a look inside. He cannot, but he's very close to the rear of Marius 373. But yeah, the weird thing for me was, like, I was waking up, I think, like 6 in the morning. I get in the car, like, it's getting light outside, and it's pitch black in the sim.
Yeah, I think we had an endurance race similar to that, where the clock was just completely off scale of what was in game to real life. Can't remember what event it was, but yeah, it really threw me, like looking out the window, seeing daylight, and then looking back to my monitor and seeing pure like pitch blackness as I squint to find the next apex. But speaking of endurance races, Kevin, of course, last weekend, the Prez 12 Hours of Spa, of course, saw our very own RCI team of Verstappen, Machuska, Daly, and Heilman take victory in the Pro-Am class for the RCI esports team in the Audi R8 Evo 2. Oliver Hagstrom Vigishu and Mikael Sundström came fourth in the Pro class after, I'm being told, with a very tricky start with a couple of accidents involved at the start, a few bad luck decisions along the way, but still managed to claw back a fourth in class. So great to see. Of course, keep your eyes peeled over on the RCI Twitter. Of course, you can see our social links down below in the description, or they do scroll across the bottom of the screen, the bottom right hand side. There we go, RCI_racing on Twitter. If you do want to follow any of our team antics, website antics, community antics, and Mike Redford there, very late decision to go into the pits, nearly caught Oliver Hagstrom Vigishu's front end as he did round into the lane. Nicholas Nordquist now on the back of Dominic Fekete. Of course, not for position in a championship fight for Fekete, although needs to minimise time loss. And there we go, big slide through the S's, and that's exactly what it does. Nicholas Nordquist finds himself up into P20 overall. And Katrina Scott in the chat saying that we cursed Ted Edwards. It was nothing she did. It was all on us, Kevin.
Yeah, I already replied, yeah, I won't take that. I don't want to be responsible for that.
Lies and slander.
Yeah, lies and slander indeed. We've had a couple more penalties come through, so once again, please interrupt me if something interesting is happening on track. But an incident lap 2, turn 10, involving the 555 and the 195 racing incident, minor contact. Lap 3, turn 1, involving the 6 and the 54, 5 seconds for the 54. Avoidable contact on the number 6, leading to the loss of 3 positions. Lap 3, turn 10, between the 89 and 33, racing incident, minor contact. And lap 4, turn 10, involving the 34 and the 24, the same racing incident, minor contact. Lap 5, turn 1, involving the 24 and the 100, no further action. 24 turns in on the 100, making contact, 24 loses out. Lap 8, turn 11, between the 195 and the 123. Warning for 123 for making contact with the 195, causing momentary loss of control. And the last one we've got coming through at the moment is lap 10, turn 1, involving the 6 and the 195. 15 seconds for 195, takeout, position returned. I think the drive-throughs that we've seen come through must have been for track limits.
Yeah, it has to have been. No official note from the stewards, of course. Kevin going down a rather sizable list from Will Stevenson. Again, shout out to all the live stewards giving up their time this evening. AJ, Andreas, Connor, Glenn, Daniel, Jesse Lee, Martin, and Will Stevenson. Of course, putting every single ounce of stewarding to the test, although a fairly kind of even spread of penalties being given out. Seems fairly fair tonight, I would say, Kevin. And we see Ted Edwards with a drive-through. Must be curse to the commentator, Kevin, because we were literally only talking about Ted like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, I think this one is on us and not on anything that's being said in chat. But yeah, taking that drive-through, it's going to hurt him. He was in the fight there before, so this hurts him though. He's now cleared his drive-through. He's back on track again. He's already done his pit stop. D21 correction. Is that just ahead of the leaders? So he's all the way down to the back of the field. Though, as always, anything can happen, and he could fight back. Maybe he can even get a bit of luck if he lets the 1 and 2 past and gets the tow from Wolf and Tushka.
Yeah, hopefully if he can let the leaders go through. Of course, bit of a curveball thrown in the scenario now. Ted Edwards with the pigeon car. Weren't really expecting him to be a part of this lead fight, but here he is. Blue flag's going to be shown, and I believe that was a flash of the pigeon there on the right-hand side, just coming out of Coppice turn 7. Ted possibly parked it. He's given up. Is going. Is rally crossing. As we see a race replay, let's see what happened. Ted Edwards coming up the hill, going to the left, and of course then jamming on the brakes for the right. Turns in and just keeps turning, Kevin. Looks like it's maybe a hardware failure.
Yeah, or just fully got out of the way of the leaders, because there you can see the car of Christopher Staper go past, and then he hits the accelerator to rejoin the track. So I think he just didn't want to interfere with any of the lead drivers and just went off.
maybe we could get Katrina Scott in the same household as Ted to go and find out possibly what happened there. But Katrina, we do believe track limits for Ted Edwards' drive-through. Of course, the 15 seconds you see against his name was for the takeout against David Grunstrom, I believe, on the stewards' reports. Of course, 15 seconds can only be taken at the pit stop. If you've already taken your pit stop, 15 seconds will be added on to the end of your race time. So a bit of a stinker for Ted this one, and as the timing goes blank, he jumps back to the pits. I believe Ted Edwards is unfortunately calling it a day in the finale. Katrina, maybe we can get an inside scoop from Ted if he wants to pop in the chat and let us know what happened. Would be great to hear from him there. Looked like possibly a hardware failure if I'd ever seen one myself. But Richard Phillips on the back of Tom Shipston. Snooty McFleud ahead has managed to break away from Tom and now caught the back of Albin Manson. And if he passes Manson, of course, that will be again for a championship position. So points to be had there as Richard Phillips chases the back of Tom Shipston. Different cars, of course. Phillips finds himself in the silver class. Shipston finds himself in the pro class. So even if the move does get made, no championship points will be gained or lost. And speaking of championship points, I went through Tim Ireland's spreadsheet again. Interrupt me, of course, if anything does happen. Richard Phillips now to the inside, coming out of Copper's turn 8, side by side, down Starkey straight towards the S's. We saw this only a few laps ago with Snooty not working all too well. Can these boys make it work this time? Shipston slams on the anchors, takes the shorter line. Phillips does sensibly kind of back out of it and doesn't try and race him side by side. However, back to my apparently you're not allowed to disturb whilst he's racing, banished to the living room. Terrible scenes in the Edwards Scott household there. But maybe we can get an inside scoop sometime soon. But looking towards Tim Ireland's spreadsheet of facts about Monday drivers and Monday championships, Wolf has 2 first positions and 2 second place finishes, with his worst being Zolder. We then have Torzidlo, of course, just ahead there in the blue car, flashing past the shot. Has 2 second place finishes and a win, but with 0 points finish at Bathurst. So, of course, drop round there to be had. And then we have Verstraper, has a first, 2 seconds, a third, and a fourth, with the worst result being a 12th at Snetterton, this man here, the Belgian driver. So that's what's kept their championship fight alive. And now we move on to the silver class of Konrad Jetsen, who is very far down the order still. P16 trying to fight his way back through Victor Norquist. Still ahead of him on the road to clear. Still quite a gap to make up on that one. If you look to the track map, we see Konrad Jetsen there coming across the start line. And then you see the Nordquist car, number 19, just going down the old hairpin where there's a yellow flag for some reason on a car. The 195, something's happened there. The 19 does make it through absolutely fine. So great to see on the circuit map, all is good. But Jetsen has had 2 wins, a second and a third. Again, with the worst result being Bathurst in 11th, so kind of almost mirroring Torzidlo, not having great luck at Bathurst. Lindgren has scored a win, 4 seconds, and his worst place was 16th at Kyalami. And then we have Dominic Fekete with 3 wins and a third from Watkins Glen, with the lowest finish being, of course, the sign-out rounds where he didn't actually compete. So, even Christian Lindgren, you look one win.
I'm just going to interrupt you here as Hatcham Figurtube tries to go around the outside of the Melbourne hairpin. Tries to cut back behind Bayron. Is not able to complete the move as he tries again through Goddards. See, Bayron goes deep. Hatcham Figurtube taking the inside line. And yeah, Bayron went fully wide, and that is the move completed.
Yeah, Bayron with a very late move there. Looked like he was almost going back on himself to do the S's. He went that wide in the final corner. But it does prove that, Lindgren with 1 win but 4 second places is enough to still keep you in a championship fight. So, even when you think it's all over and you're not quite getting wins, of course, every little bit can help. And Katrina Scott still giving us the inside scoop on Ted Edwards. She can still hear the wheel. So Ted is still racing. He has left the pits. Seems to have cleared his 15 seconds off, maybe by escaping to the pit lane and waiting for that timer to count down. But of course, it doesn't put him anywhere near the back of David Grunstrom, unfortunately. But great to see Ted still continuing in the final race, just over 25 minutes to go. Snooty McFleud now looking to the back of Albin Manson into the S's, trying to get a clean run if he can down towards Melbourne hairpin, but it looks like Manson's just absolutely sent it through the chicane there, and it's Ginetta McFleud nowhere near the back to make a move, although Tom Shipston still creeping behind these guys. The top 14 still yet to pit, just over 23 minutes of a pit window to go. And looking like the field has gapped itself out a little bit now, Kevin. We see Matuszka there 1 second to the good. Heilmann still way down the road. Verstraper not far behind. Boardman again a fair chunk behind. So everybody's now in their own little pocket. So it's going to be interesting to see who's practiced the pit stops the most. And I think that could be the decider of maybe the Matuszka and Zidlo fight towards the front.
Yeah, even though the field has spread out a little bit now, once those top 14 drivers currently still needing to do the pit stop have done it, we can see a lot of the grid just fall back together, and we'll have some couple of close battles again. Could be a possibility, but yeah, seeing them spread out a little bit, still the closest battle is between Monson and Ginetta McFleud, with Wolf Matuszka being just below a second behind Marius. But yeah, it's still going to be very interesting to see where it all ends up once these top 14 drivers do their pit stop. Where did they end up, and how big will the gaps be?
Yeah, I did see Wolf in practice coming out as he usually does, doing an outlap, coming into the pit lane, pulling down pit lane, going back out, and doing the exact same thing a good couple of times over. So Wolf has practiced to the T where to slam on the brakes, where to get the limiter on, and how to hopefully not get a speeding in the pit lane penalty. But flicking back now, Ginetta McFleud on Albin Manson, still ever closer is Snoody riding on board the splitter cam now, looking up at the back of Albin Manson's car towards the last turn. Snoody with a much wider line, trying to do the kind of up and over undercut there, but Albin Manson covering it off nicely, not allowing anything to go through that gap that might have been left. They now continue on to another lap towards turn one, ready to begin another lap of dicing. We see Snoody very confident on the brakes there, but then we see Manson with kind of the better mid-turn, and I would say the better exit, but did run himself wide onto the grass. And now we see the gain of Ginetta McFleud down the Carina curve, somewhere where you don't want to be going side by side with your opponent, now down into the old hairpin. No move to be had here, no overcut, undercut at all, both keeping it very clean through there, and now begins to run up the hill with a terrifying eyes at the bottom of the picture, something that Albin Manson is going to be staring at in his mirror, something that as a driver you definitely don't want to be seeing. And there we go, the door gets left kind of wide open at the top of the hill on McLean's. Ginetta McFleud side by side now coming into Coppice turn 8. Typically very tricky corner to go side by side, not a lot of grip on the outside, the inside is where you want to be, and Albin Manson does sensibly maybe give up that fight, and the terrifying face can now press on to catch Christian Lindgren.
Yeah, well, there's a big gap between Snoody and Lindgren, so won't see that battle for a while. As we see Nicholas Nordqvist now right up the rear of Matthias Thornberg, who does still have that 5-second penalty. I think that's a penalty that just came through, so we'll have a look in a bit. But yeah, this is still a very close pack between Redford, Thornberg and Nordqvist. As we see a little bit of a squirrely exit for Nordqvist, but still right to the rear of Matthias Thornberg. So we'll see if he can shoot up the inside of McLean's. Opts to, no, he goes for it as, well, I think that's the pigeon car of Ted Edwards and another car. It's the 1, 2, 3 off the track, so I guess something happened there.
I could have sworn that was Oliver Hagstrom-Viggershoe, but I could be very much mistaken. Facing backwards, but definitely Ted Edwards. That's Hagstrom-Viggershoe there. It was Conrad Jetson in the gravel, and now he lets his teammate pass Zidlo, giving him a very wide berth, allowing Matuszka through as well. Going to see what happened with the stewards as we now flick to a race replay. Ted Edwards here coming up, gives it the old Beijing swing, and finds the back of Conrad Jetson. Ooh. Unfortunately, not too good there, and stewards definitely going to be frowning upon that one. Very interesting. Not really sure what happened with Ted there.
I think he, as he turned in for McLean's, he was on the grass when he hit the brakes. Then he just lost the rear and kept on sliding. And yeah, Conrad Jetson was just an unfortunate passenger in that accident. I don't think there was any malice from Ted Edwards there, but yeah, that's not something you like to see.
Yeah, definitely like to think there was no kind of, foul intent from Ted Edwards, very own RCI staff member. Wouldn't be setting a great example if there was malice. So I'm sure human error, we all make mistakes, now and again. It's how you kind of learn from their mistakes that progresses you as a driver. And of course, that's going to harm Conrad Jetsen's run to Christian Lindgren, who is way, way up the road now in P7, still just behind Maximilian Vade. But Richard Phillips looking to the back still of Tom Shipston, trying to find a way through. Still no position gained or lost in the last 5 minutes. These guys have been locked for a little while. Both drivers still, again, yet to take a pit stop. I think I find myself saying this time and time again, but pit lane is sometimes where it's all been decided. Look at Bathurst, Christopher Straper with a very early pit, and then 3 minutes before the end, he rounds turn 1 and he's in the lead. So, anything to play for. Speed in the pit lane is a big one that catches a lot of drivers out. Missing your box, 1 litre of fuel sounds like a very fast pit stop, but if you miss your marks, you've then got to shuffle the car back, forward, side by side, and possibly lose yourself a lot of time. Whereas if your opponent drops it straight on the jacks, drops the 1 litre in, fires it up, and off they go again, can be a very fast turnaround if you have practiced it. And this man here, Wolf Matuszka, has certainly practiced it indeed. And now we see the Sim Brothers cars, Victor Nordquist in the back there. Not sure which driver that is ahead with the green wheels, possibly.
I think it's Bayron.
It is Bayron. Yeah, you're right. So Sim Brothers cars, luckily putting the driver's name on the rear wing helps us up here in the commentary booth when we get all the right angles. Sim Brothers across the top, and of course the driver's name you'll find underneath. But great to see, teams sporting comical liveries such as the Jurassic Park series, and we now see a drive-through for Oliver Hagstrom-Viggersjö just pop up. No note from the stewards, but side by side now, Nicholas Nordquist and Mike Redford up to the top of the hill, turn 7. Nordquist to the inside, Redford covers it off beautifully. Nordquist runs himself that little bit wide, allows Redford to take a little bit of a gap now towards Coppice. I think Redford's safe for another lap there, but Hagstrom-Viggersjö with a drive-through, and then he's just kind of disappeared off the board. So I think Oliver Hagstrom-Viggersjö has unfortunately called it a day, Kevin.
Yeah, it does look like it's not something you like to see. You like to see people continue. Doesn't matter if you get a drive-through or not. But yeah, sometimes if things are not going your way and you get the drive-through, then it might just be too much for you to continue. As you now see Nicholas Nordquist try and go around the outside of the Melbourne hairpin, and they go side by side through, with Redford keeping the inside line, but it will probably be a better drive out for Nicholas Nordquist. They head towards the last turn. Goddard, as Redford goes deep, Nordquist goes on the inside, Redford goes very deep, and that's a good execution by Nicholas Nordquist. So now look at Wolf Matuszka getting closer and closer to the back of Marius Torzidlo as they round out Goddard onto the start-finish straight towards Redgate. Yeah, these two have been inseparable throughout the entire race. And now see Mike Redford trying to get past Marius Thornberg, going through the first couple of corners towards the old hairpin. So yeah, he'll try and get back a couple of positions there. Yeah, there are a couple of fights which have been happening like throughout the entirety of the race.
Yeah, great to see guys still battling, and like you say, Torzidlo and Matuszka, two inseparable drivers, not only this race at Donington Park, but pretty much for the whole season. We saw him duking out at Suzuka, we saw him duking out at Watkins Glen, and now we take the fight to Britain where they continue to duke it out. But I think while you were casting the fight between Redford and Thornberg on that last lap, I saw Ted Edwards going backwards through the S's in just to the left of the camera shot that we had. So not sure what happened there. Maybe Edwards taking the rallycross line like we saw him take earlier. But these two here still locked into the S's. Nothing to separate them. It's you literally can't call this one-make racing. It's just such a crazy scenario. You think you're both in the same car. You both have roughly probably the same setup between the two of you. And just completely inseparable. Though last lap out, Wolf Matuszka was that little bit quicker. 1:35.290 for Wolf and 1:35.4 dead for Marius in the Carbon Simsport car. And looking to their best lap times as well, again, inseparable. Wolf Matuszka with a 1:35.090 and Marius Torzidlo's best lap, a 1:35.072. Literally, you could not split them if you tried. And that time by Wolf Matuszka, slightly slower, 0.100 in it between the two guys now. So Wolf losing that gap a little bit, down to half a second now, 0.499 as you see on the scoreboard there. Flashing through the sector, now goes up to 0.537. As long as Marius Torzidlo can kind of keep it clean, we see a little bit of traffic, Kevin, heading up the hill. Look at that, 1, 2, 3, 4 cars ahead to clear. I wonder if these guys are going to be pitting or whether they're going to make it a little bit awkward for Marius getting through.
Well, we'll see. It could also depend on what Marius and Wolf and Tushka want to do themselves. Seeing this group of cars ahead might just be that they decide, well, this might as well be a good time to head into pits while they're at it. But I'll also have a look now at, well, the one penalty that we got coming through was an incident on lap 21, turn 7 involving the 127 and 48. Racing incident, minor contact, so that's all we have so far. We did see some things happen, as we see a drive-through for Nicholas Nordqvist, so that's probably for track limits. That's going to hurt him, because he was fighting very hard against Thornburg and Redford to get to that position, so this drive-through will hurt him. Yeah, looking at where he was when that flashed through, he was kind of between the Melbourne hairpin and the last turn of Goddard, so logic states he just cut that a little bit too much through the S's. And like you say, if I was in Marius Torzidlo's shoes, seeing that yellow car ahead getting ever nearer and nearer, I'd wait until it gets too near and then suddenly dive into the pit lane. And if Wolf can't react quick enough, then you might find Wolf continues another lap, gets stuck behind the yellow machine, and then of course finds himself losing time. But the first of our top 12 to blink, Christopher Straper. Really strange to see him coming in at this time. He's normally either a very early guy or a very late guy, and Christian Lindgren gets the same idea as well, coming down pit lane thinking this might be a good time to call it. Konrad Jetson looking very dicey now with Nicholas Nordqvist after that drive-through penalty. There's just too many Nordqvists, too many Sim Brothers cars. If you guys can either change your names or slightly livery your cars a little bit differently, it might make it a bit easier for myself and Kevin up here in the comms box. But Christoph Verstreper has cleared his pit stop. Christian Lindgren again has cleared his too, and you see him sliding down the order on the left-hand side of the page. But this is what we were talking about, Kevin. Marius Torzidlo now finds himself that little bit close to the back of the yellow Ginetta. Very sensible driving, pulls over, I believe, Dominic Fekete in that one. I can't see Joe Dorber's name on the board anymore, so that must be Dominic, the Hungarian driver. And now Mike Redford is the next car in the queue, getting out both of the way of first and second to allow those guys to continue fighting. Although all the meanwhile, Marius Torzidlo still pulling out a gap, 0.642 to the good now, going up and up every lap it seems. But these boys do continue to stay out, and this could maybe be a little bit of a mistake if these guys don't get out of the way. That are the back markers, of course. GT Racing, very different to Formula One. Typically in Formula One, you see a blue flag dive straight out of the way. In GT Racing, it is, of course, up to the faster car to pass you safely. So let's see what happens. And now Ted Edwards with a stop-go 10, Kevin. It just gets worse and worse for poor Ted. Yeah, it does. And I think this might be for the mistake and slide into Konrad Jetson that he had earlier going into McLean's. I have a look at penalties now. It's lap 24, turn 7, so that is McLean's. 1, 2, 3 into 195, stop and go 10 for car 195. Loses control and crashes into 1, 2, 3, causing several lost positions and severe damage. So, yeah, and it goes from bad to worse for Ted Edwards, because that's a disqualification for reaching the license point limit for a single race. So that's not the end of the season that Ted Edwards wanted there.
Yeah, Pigeon Car calling it a little bit premature this time out, unfortunately for Ted. Just had that little bit of unluckiness in this race. But now Nicholas Nordqvist making it awkward for Konrad Jetson on the comeback to try and charge towards Christian Lindgren. As we thought, Nordqvist putting up a bit of a fight to try and delay Jetson, maybe as much as he can, but I think probably he's done enough, I would say, to hold off Jetson. Of course, with the contact with Ted Edwards, it's going to put an absolute downer on Jetson's comeback, although excited to see how this will turn out. Of course, championship results will be posted over on the RCI website once all decisions have been made. But Nordqvist still to the inside. Jetson runs himself deep to try and get that better run down the start finish straight, although I think Nordqvist has done just enough to make that move stick. And we see now Andy Boardman and Maximilian Vede with a very late kind of turn into the pit lane just behind. Thought Vade was going to kind of oversteer into the pit wall. We flicked it that hard, but again, 2 more drivers from that top 12 pack to blink. Christoph Verstraper is, of course, your man in the lead on the road that has cleared his pit stop, and Christian Lindgren was not too far behind him, although Victor Nordquist finds himself ahead of his teammate. I'm wondering if we're going to see maybe a few team orders coming in between the Sim Brothers boys to see if they can get their boy Christian Lindgren up the order that little bit more to get that, few more championship points. But Maximilian Vade here with a very long stop, Kevin. He came in the same time as Andy Boardman. We saw Boardman peeling out the pit lane, and Vade is still in the box.
Yeah, we don't know exactly what's happened there. Maybe he picked up some damage early on that he wants to get repaired. Maybe he forgot to switch off the tyre change, which it could be easy to do if you're not looking carefully, if you just want to quickly get into the pits. Especially here at Donington, it's a short pit lane. So, yeah, you can easily forget it within that short amount of time. As we're now looking at Mike Redford, still looking at the back of the Pink Panther car of Matthias Thornberg, as we do have the pink performance car of Wolf Matuszka just in front there. So very difficult to differentiate those two. But yeah, it still looks like Marius and Wolf Matuszka keep on going. What I do want to have a look at real quick is some of the differences between the times we see for the pit stops. Looking at Christopher Strepe, he had a pit stop time of 30.801. And compared it to Andy Boardman, who does a 32.132. So you can already see that is a difference of a second and a half. So we know how well Wolf Matuszka practices these pit stops. So even though he's now 2 seconds behind Marius, he might be able to gain that in the pit stop.
Yeah, still a big gap between the two guys, and I've got a slightly different pit stop time on my end, although only about 0.1, 0.2 in it. Looking at Maximilian Vade's stop, 57.603. On my end. I think Kevin's probably not far off that one, but a very, very slow stop indeed. Almost 27 if you compare it to Verstraper's stop. 27 seconds nearly to the good there. So very bad stop from the virtual drivers by TX3. Not sure what happened there, but he does find himself down in P13 with only just under 8 minutes to go. Even if he did take tyres, possibly a little bit too late in the race to maybe capitalize on that fresh Pirelli rubber once they get into the window. Kevin, you know as well as I do, they take about 2 laps to even get into the good. They do up the pressures, up the temperatures, etc. So by the time you've done 2 laps of Donington at a minute 30, as we see contact there, Dominic Fekete, Mike Redford sidewayses himself into the pit lane. I'm not sure if he hasn't Austin Powers it. That was my initial thought. At Spa, if you get it completely wrong coming into the pit lane, you can kind of get yourself wedged in between the two. As we ride on board, Mike Redford looking back here at Dominic Fekete, down into the last turn of Gollard's. Redford goes a little bit wide, maybe a little bit of oversteer, comes back across the front of Fekete and just stops it just before he was going to Austin Powers himself, although the Donington pit entry looks like it's got a little bit of room either side, not like Spa, where it's a solid concrete wall all the way down and you're kind of forced to return to the garage. So a bit of rotten luck there from Redford, although Fekete does, of course, take a position and does gain a few more championship points. But this man here, Marius Torzidlo, after the traffic, Kevin, that they encountered, 1.7 seconds to the good now on Wolf Matuszka. This is really going to be decided on a pit stop. Just under 5 minutes to go on the pit window, and one of these guys is going to have to blink in the next 4 minutes.
Yeah, so I think either this lap or the one after, they'll probably head into at least have a bit of margin, unless they've perfectly timed it to do it one after. But yeah, this probably will be decided by how well they do their pit stop, as it's now a bit too far for Wolf Matuszka to really crawl back and then make a move, which he hasn't been able to do all race. And it seems like they've both decided to go out for one more lap at least before they make their pit stop. Yeah, it could be either this lap or the one after, looking at the time remaining with the pit window open. But yeah, already seeing like 3, 4, 5 seconds between some of the drivers in the pit stops. Anything could happen there.
Yeah, all to play for between these two. Marius Torzidlo navigates down the Craner curves, chased by Wolf Matuszka into the old hairpin gap. Still around about 1.7 to 1.9 to the good It seems one lap Wolf gains, next lap Torzidlo gains the gap again. So literally cannot separate these two. But Snooner McFlood now into the pit lane, flying Hellfish Taters. Very Hellfish face indeed, comes down the pit lane, nodding as it goes. Christoph Verstreper now comes across the line to take another position away. Albin Manson again finds himself down in the pit lane. So Verstreper now up to P4, I believe, overall. So is now your, no, P4, yeah. It's far too late for maths tonight. But yeah, Kingston Lee there jumps up, and then of course Verstreper jumps up behind him. Just over 3 minutes to go. Probably another 2 laps in it for these boys if they want to push it that far, although I'm not sure who will blink first. Although Matthew Kingston Lee, silver leader provisionally on the road. Christian Lindgren, of course, was your silver leader initially, stuck behind Maximilian Vede, now finds himself passed by Victor Nordquist. 3 seconds to the good on that fight, as Torzidlo now rounds Goddards for one final time. Looks way too wide to be coming in. Matuszka way too wide again, misses the pit entry. So one more time by, and I think that will be it, Kevin. They won't have time to go again.
No, if they don't do it this lap, they'll have to do it. Well, they have to do it this lap, because otherwise they'll have 1 minute left, and that won't be enough time to complete the lap. So we'll see both these drivers go into the pits at the end of this current lap. Maybe the likes of Harman and Kingston Lee might go in this lap, though I think they've also now both crossed the start-finish line. So we'll see all the top 4 currently head into the pits at the end of this lap, or they'll suffer the 130-second penalty for not completing their pit stops, the required pit stops. We see Kingston Lee come in now, and yeah, we'll see how well the pit stops of Marius and Wolf go.
Last lap by, Kevin. Looking at Torzidlo and Matuszka's last lap times, 1:35.3 from Torzidlo and at 1:36.2 from Wolf. Wolf lost a full second that last time by, and he's losing even more now with 0.4 lost over the last sector. Takes him up to a gap of 3.2 seconds. I think even if Torzidlo messes this stop up massively, it's still not going to be enough to, you know, allow Wolf back through, allow Wolf back to the rear end of his car, but I don't think it will allow Wolf to overtake him as easily on the pit stop as we think. And Conrad Jetson now follows Nicholas Nordquist through the S's, and now here we go. Torzidlo round the last corner, dives in, pit in board 50, there we go. Wolf Matuszka follows in suit again, right on the limit, and Benjamin Harman will be your last man to pit. He has no more time on the pit time, of course, 1 minute 30 plus round here, just over a minute to go on the pit window, and Harman does indeed dive in. Richard Phillips is now right on the back of Matthew Kingston Lee, coming up the hill through McLean's into Coppice. RPMS Simsport, no stranger to fighting his way back through the field and fighting drivers of a higher caliber. We see Kingston Lee with a big slide coming out of Coppice down onto Saki Straight. This is going to allow Richard Phillips to get a slight edge over the yellow Ginetta down into turn 9 of the S's. He's not going for the move, but he is going to make it very awkward for Kingston Lee, but Kingston Lee chops his nose off, gets an excellent run through the chicane, and now fires himself down towards the Melbourne hairpin. Not going to be close enough to make a move. Benjamin Harman comes out. Of course, Wolf Matuszka follows ahead of him, and Marius Torzidlo, there we go, ahead of him. 2.3 seconds to the good. Not sure what your pit stop timers say, but my end, Kevin, 30.021 for Wolf and a 31.223 for Torzidlo. So even if Torzidlo, you know, even if they were about a second to the good, that would have been where Wolf could have made the pass.
Yeah, and so when we saw them fight before they hit the pack of back markers, they were about a second split between them. So I think if Wolf decided to go into the pits then and there, he could have been ahead, but he might have destroyed his tyres a bit too much trying to push forwards to get past Marius before the pit stops. But yeah, it does look like it was just that second between the 2 pit stop times. And yeah, if he'd done it earlier, maybe he could have had it. But yeah, then we already go into the realm of ifs, buts, and maybes. As we just saw an extra penalty come through from the game. I don't see anything in our Stewart's channel just yet about that. So we'll get to it if that comes through. I do want to mention, though, you see Maximilian Vedi with the fastest lap currently with a 1:34.737, faster than both our front runners. So that's some good stuff by him, as the leader is now on the final lap.
maybe taking tyres and doing a Charles Leclerc for the fastest lap of the race is how he's going to gain an extra few championship points. Maybe a very smart move to be had. Not sure if it's going to be enough to clinch anything massively, as Matthew Kingston-Lee runs himself a little bit deep in the Melbourne hairpin. Richard Phillips not quite close enough to capitalise, although the gap has slightly shrunk down into the last turn. Although Maximilian Vede fired up, probably on new Pirellis, I would say, judging by the amount of time he is chunking. White flag is, of course, out. Leaders on their final lap. The 373 is just coming out of Coppice, followed by Wolf Matuszka there, turn 8. This will be the last time by for these boys. 2.5 seconds to the good on Wolf. I don't think, unless Torzidlo makes a catastrophic mistake, he's going to be, anywhere close. Although just ahead we see Konrad Jetson. Maybe these boys getting ready for a team photo, but don't be too kind of risky with it, because look in the background there, Wolf Matuszka is lurking ever so much. And there we go, Jetson lets his teammate by, allows him to run to the line to take the kind of extra lap away. Will finish, unfortunately, a lap down, although these two getting very good broadcasting for all of their sponsors on their car. Of course, the Carbon Simsport boys, Marius Torzidlo and Konrad Jetson. Checkered flag waves. Marius Torzidlo takes your victory at the final round of Donington, followed by Wolf Matuszka. 2.7 seconds to the good in the end, Kevin. And no team orders from Heilmann and Verstreper. Although, will we see team orders here? We got Lindgren and Nordqvist. And then we got Snooty McFlood getting in between the two. Of course, no points to be had for Snooty, just kind of overall honours. Although we see running a little bit deep. Is he going to lift? Are we going to see any team orders? No team orders. Oh no, Christian Lindgren is ahead there. See under the rear wing by the line. Lindgren gets let past by Victor Nordqvist to gain the maximum amount of championship points. And Maximilian Vede on Richard Phillips, wanting that 11th place off him again. No championship points to be had between the two. Flash of the hazard there from Richard Phillips. Maybe just wanted a little bit of a fight towards the end. And Albin Manson, P13, coming across the line on that one. Followed by another Swede, Matthias Byron in P14. Followed by another Swede just down the road, Matthias Thornberg in the Pink Panther racing car. Of course, not to be confused with Wolf Matuszka's Pink Performance Ginetta, and he comes across the line to take P15. Dominic Fekete, probably not the season finale he wanted. P3 in the championship overall, comes across the line now in P16 overall. About P6, I believe, in silver, roughly, by counting down the order. And Nicholas Nordqvist, your last car to round out in P17 overall. And what a race that was, Kevin. Great scenes up and down the grid. Unfortunately, Wolf Matuszka could not do enough to get past Torzidlo. Heilmann champions over Verstreper. And we see team orders coming in from the Sim Brothers Racing, Christian Lindgren, to take the victory from Victor Nordqvist.
Yeah, it was definitely a good race. Saw some good racing throughout the park, throughout the race. Yeah, some drivers didn't really have the race that they wanted. Yeah, just a bit of bad luck, maybe a bit of loss of concentration for some of them. But I think in overall, yeah, this was a good race, good end to the championship, with the fights for P1 in both classes still being fought out on the field. But yeah, we still see. Especially for Dominic Fekete, this is not what he wanted to see today. Bit of bad luck on his side, but on the other hand, if you then look at Christian Lindgren, what a race from him.
There we go, as the fireworks get let off in the daytime at Donington. Not quite sure how that works by physics, but hey, here we are in a virtual game. Man ahead of you there, Stewie Heilmann, or Benjamin Heilmann, as he's called in-game, our very own Stewie at RCI, responsible for everything kind of websitey and occasionally broadcasting. So great to see RCI staff members do get a chance to race occasionally. And of course, with the Christmas break coming up, maybe it will be more and more. As we see the Carbon Simsport boys there, just a few boxes apart in the pit lane. Richard Phillips then decides to photobomb the lovely shot, and the flags are waving across the pit wall. And I think we have some Jurassic antics going on the main straight. Ryan Mawson speeding ahead with the drone to try and get everybody in shot, as we see the Sim Brothers Racing team put on a acrobatic display, shall we say, and then there's a Pink Panther getting tail whipped by a T-Rex in the middle of the grid. But great to see a fun end to a fun championship overall, and a few stats I pulled from Tim's sheet. Again, this is all current Ginetta drivers on a Monday who have raced on every single Monday. The most points goes to Wolf Matuszka with 1053 over a season of RCI. Andy Boardman with 923, and Joe Dorber coming in with 784. Most races on a Monday goes to Andy Boardman with 40, Matthew Kingston Lee with 38, and Mike Redford with 28. RPMS Richard Phillips has 8 fastest laps, Wolf Matuszka 7, Joe Dorber takes 5. And no surprise here, but Wolf Matuszka takes the most race wins with 12. Joe Dorber has 6. Tom Shipston takes 5. Wolf Matuszka takes 12 pole positions versus our next nearest driver, Joe Dorber, on 6. And Richard Phillips, again, RPMS, takes 4. And we touched on this last time, but Matthew Kingston Lee has a whopping 650 pre-qualifying laps to his name. Nicholas Nordquist next in queue with 305. And just behind him is Christian Lingeren with 299. Tim Ireland has told me he will be doing a breakdown of all the stats throughout the season. I have sent them over to him, so you might see a copy and paste of these. But yeah, for now, what a wonderful season this has been. I can't wait for what the next Monday Championship brings. I'm fingers and toes crossed it's another one-make championship. I'd love to see the Ferrari challenge. I'd love to see people with all of the speed and none of the brakes and see how that fares out between everyone. But keep your eyes peeled over on the RCI website. That's racerci.com. And lastly, of course, the final message I will do from our partners on Monday, AK Informatica, for providing our server solutions here at RCI. However, they also do provide high-end hardware, peripherals, and accessories, including sim gear. So if you are in the market, do go and check them out. See if you can pick up any Christmas giftings for yourself, an accidental present or two. And if you do want to improve yourself with your new sim gear, of course, driver61.com. You can, of course, get 25% off your driver coaching by using our discount code with a link in the description below and heading on over to driver61.com. And finally, of course, Fanatec, your one-stop shop for the best sim racing equipment on the market. You can, of course, use our affiliate link down in the description below, and it won't cost you a single penny, but it does, of course, help us here with the running costs at RCI. And what a wonderful season we've had. Battles up and down the field in both pro and silver. Keep your eyes peeled on the website for the final results once all the stewards' decisions have been made for the race. But from myself, John Dalton, from my co-caster, Kevin Boss, it's been wonderful to have you here for a full season, Kevin. And of course, Ryan, the multitasker Mawson, he's been on comms, he's been on cameras. The only thing he hasn't been on in this championship is stewarding. But of course, a big shout out to him to make the broadcast possible. So from all of us here tonight, from the stewards and from everybody at RCI, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Happy holidays if we don't catch each other in the meantime. And I bid you all farewell and take care of yourselves.